Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1479 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday evening into Thursday. And today's podcast is brought to you by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. When you enter the promo code LockedOnNBA, you'll get a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with each and every order. And I also want to say at the top of the podcast, make us your first listen each and every day. Check us out and subscribe across platforms, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. And today's podcast is myself and Glen Willis of Peachtree Hoops and ATL 29. To continue our player capsule series, Glenn and I have talked about myriad players already across this series, going back to Saddiq Bey, AJ Griffin, etc. And today's podcast is going to be on Jalen Johnson, the Hawks' second year, soon to be third year forward. Very, very interesting prospect, a lot of upside, etc. We'll have many more players to cover in the future. I do thank Glenn for coming on the podcast repeatedly. Also, earlier this week, I talked to myself basically about some mailbag questions and as well as the Trae Young pseudo rumor. And I use rumor very lightly in that framing. So if you missed that podcast, please check that out as well. Please subscribe to the podcast. After the intro plays, you'll have myself and Glen Willis talking about Jalen Johnson.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I am joined now by a good friend of the podcast and the co-host for this player capsule series. Glen Willis is here. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm good. Enjoying these playoffs, whatever round we're in right now. It's really exciting.
Yes.
To watch.
Yeah, that's part of the fun. I'm sure people will notice what I'm wearing and what the ads look like and all that. One of the beauties, only one of them, of the series is that these are pretty fluid in when I have to post them. So, for instance, as we're recording this podcast, I have to travel the next couple of days, and I can hold these. And generally speaking, knock on wood, nothing bad is going to happen until I have to throw these in the trash can. So that is one of the nice things about recording these player capsules. But if you missed it so far, we have posted the podcast about the supporting cast as well as Saddiq Bey and AJ Griffin. They've all gone up at this point. So Jalen Johnson is up on the agenda today. And an interesting player. I think we've kind of poked fun at it in a friendly way. I think you and I both like Jalen Johnson quite a bit. The comparisons to LeBron have been kind of funny to see from Hawks fans, or the good version of Ben Simmons has been thrown around. That's always a fun one too. But long story short, we do like Jalen. I think I can speak for you at least that far. We'll start broad as we usually do on these. How was Jalen's second season for you? Because in a lot of ways, it was kind of like his rookie year.
It was. I think we saw that his starting point was good enough that it suggests he made the most of even this time at College Park last year. And you and I both heard all season long last season, well, why isn't Jalen playing? Why isn't Jalen playing? Yeah. And my assessment early on last season was he's just not ready defensively, and beyond that, I wasn't really sure what to expect then offensively. But this year, just so much growth. If they had a most improved player that actually went from the beginning of the season to the very end of the season, for me, it's like he'd have to be, I don't know, top 20 or something. He'd made so many strides this year to go from, man, what are we going to do with him on defense to the last 20 games, him depending on the guards at the point of attack in some cases. And I think that was mostly about reps, and to see what he can do at this point in time. But just the volume of responsibilities he was thrown into his last third of the season and his ability to navigate that, not perfectly, made mistakes, but did it well enough to make you think like, oh, those are areas where he might be able to kind of regularly contribute. I think that's so encouraging.
For sure. And, I say that it was kind of like his rookie season. And I almost said the same thing you said. We heard a lot from Hawks fans. And I understood why, because it's a first-round pick. And usually, I would say 90% of the time, first-round picks that are healthy play more than Jalen played as a rookie, no matter the context. Even guys who go 30th in the draft, if they're healthy all year long, usually play more than the 120 minutes that Jalen Johnson played as a rookie with the Hawks. And part of that, as we discussed even last year on this same kind of format, was the coach and the roster and expectations and all those things. And, he wasn't like the most raw or not ready to play yet rookie of all time, but his game is not one that's the most plug and play. And that makes him special in some ways, in some good ways for sure, but it also makes him a little bit more challenging to kind of just throw out there. And we saw it this year. I'm glad you said that about his improvement, because he did improve a lot over the course of the season. He played over 1,000 minutes. That's a nice step, just have him out there. A lot was made of his role. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, about like how he was basically treated as a pure big as a rookie, even playing the 5 like regularly in College Park. That happened. And now he's still played mostly 4 this year, but was on the perimeter, like you said, at times at the second half of the season, and his transition ability and all those things. And it was nice to see a typical kind of rookie season for a player of his talent, because much like AJ, we discussed already, Jalen Johnson was once a top 3, 4, 5 player in a high school class. And you can definitely see the physicality. You can see the talent. You can see the stuff that sort of the signs that made him that. And then he had this weird year at Duke. And then here he is. He falls too far, in our opinion, at least in mine. And he ends up with the Hawks. But we saw like all the flashes, all the frustrations, if you pay close attention, that rookies will give you. And he's still rookie age. I mean, at this very moment when we're recording this podcast, he's 21 years old. And that's after his second season. So no concerns there, and we'll kind of get into it. But he sort of played a normal rookie amount this year, about 1,000 minutes. He was a supporting piece. He was really in the rotation all year. There were a few DNP CDs along the way. I think I meant to count them. There were probably only 3 or 4 all year long where he was active, healthy, and didn't play. And the rest of the way, he was out there. And I guess we'll start. Let's throw a curve. Let's start on defense, because that's where he's, I think, been better to this point. Maybe you disagree, but I think that at the moment, just his physicality allows him to be pretty good there. And I think the advanced metrics, I won't list them all, but they kind of liked his defense so far. EPM, Raptor, all that stuff. He actually had the second best defensive rebound rate on the team, behind only Clint. That's a huge success, for instance. But we'll start here. Like, where is Jalen defensively? Because depending on who you ask, you could be hearing about how he's this game-wrecking defender, or you might focus on his weaknesses with regard to processing and getting over screens and all these things. Like, what's the realistic evaluation of Jalen Johnson now versus what he might be in a couple years?
Yes. So now it's like he does. It seemed like maybe it's the second half of the season, maybe it was more than the second half of the season, but it seems like he reliably made 2, 3, maybe 4 plays a game on defense that just like, wow, there aren't many guys that can do that, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's coming from the weak side and kind of challenging a shot at the rim, kind of coming out of nowhere, covering a lot of space. He's fantastic on like timing and feel on digs, helping with digs, like especially around the nail. He deflected a lot of balls. He created turnovers. He probably helped them get into transition on a per possession basis, maybe even more than DeJounte did, with DeJounte's ability to kind of disrupt defenses. So just a real disruptor at a minimum. But then it got better and better and better, being more solid. Like for DeJounte, it's like, it's great that you're jumping passing lanes, creating deflections, stealing the ball from average or below average ball handlers. But there are issues in other areas of his defense, and we'll cover him when his capsule gets here. But just want to, as a point of contrast, Jalen just showed that ability to disrupt, create turnovers, use digs, flash a second defender. It's like he understands how much athleticism and agility he has, and puts it to work for a guy at that young age to show up, to have presence. So he was, I think, better and more consistent in those baseline areas. The not wow areas, but those baseline, like team defense, being in the right place, giving help at the right time and from the right spot, and made a number of kind of wow plays. I was looking for kind of statistical comps, like were there many, and I put this on Twitter, I don't know, a week or so ago, but for guys that played 1,100 minutes or fewer, I'm going to memory here, so I hope I got this right. Only 5 guys had 30 steals and 30 blocks. He was one of those 5.
Yep.
And only one other of those 5 made more than 2 3-point shots. So now he was a 20% shooter, but he put up 104, made 30, right, on offense. But to have a guy who has a lot of different areas of offensive stuff starting to emerge, I guess I'll put it that way. I know we'll talk about offense more in depth, and to have the ability to create blocks, steals, and to do all those other things. I think that's just so interesting. And as the season went along on defense, more so than offense, more consistently in offense, he kind of was putting it all together, right? You see young guys that kind of have flashes of this skill here, that ability there, that awareness of that situation there. But what was encouraging to me is the ability to kind of make it all work. His reading the floor, reading the play, understanding his role in this certain situation, executing to that role, and throwing his athleticism and his size kind of into the mix all together. That was more and more and more as the season went on. And I think that he's still mostly he has so much potential that there's still more potential than ability right now. But that's saying that simply kind of undersells how much ability he's developed at this point in time. It's just because he has that much potential. He's super intriguing defensively, and he showed me at least a ton of growth this year. The time he spent on the ball later in the season, containing the ball, keeping the ball in front, I mean, C+, maybe B- in some examples, right? Navigating screens, that's rough. But, I mean, until he got put into that position late in the season, he had maybe done that 5 times in his whole NBA career. I mean, he had no kind of repetitions and stuff. So not to be surprised here that's some technique he's going to have to work on. And that may be his number one area of focus this offseason is screen navigation and learning the foot technique, the hand technique, all that sort of stuff. Because I think what Quinn did with him suggests that Quinn is interested in potentially deploying him that way.
Today's show is brought to you by Birddogs. Birddogs is fantastic, bringing fit, comfort, and versatility to the table with their products. I feel great wearing my Birddogs, and the stretchy fabric on our shorts gives me a ton of confidence and the comfort with the ability to wear the same shorts in different situations without worrying at all about the way that I'm looking or feeling. I'm not someone who wants to stress too much about what I'm wearing, but I also want to make sure that I'm feeling good and what I'm wearing actually makes sense. And Birddog checks a lot of boxes for me each and every time. I'm not a dad, but I also hear that dads are really in love with Birddogs across my life. If you're into that sort of thing, it makes perfect sense to me. So with that said, birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA is the place to go. When you get there, enter the promo code LockedOnNBA. When you do that, they will throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with each and every order. One more time, check out birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. I want to dig into that a little bit more because it's something you notice only if you're paying really close attention over the course of the season, which obviously we are. And then there was the coaching change to kind of facilitate it. But, even under Nate, and I think there was frustration that I'm sure you heard, and I know I heard from Hawks fans about like putting Jalen in a box with positions. And it's never as simple as what people make it out to be. He wasn't only, but especially for a young guy, veteran coach like Nate, he wanted to execute what he wanted him to execute. And you could do the other things as well, but you have to be able to do your job first. And Jalen Johnson, at his size, still at this point is probably more of a 4. It's just what he is. Can he play on the perimeter? Sure he can. And we saw that. But it's a different role, number one, to be asked to not necessarily anchor the defense. He's not doing that. He's not playing like Capella and Collingwood defensively. But when you're asked to kind of be the secondary rim protector and defend certain players, that's a different role than suddenly you look up in March and he's got primary assignments on guards and primary assignments on high usage wings. It's a very different role. And, the fact that he can do that is a testament to how devastating his talent is, because no one on the roster, and I say this kindly, but it's not about anybody else, but can match his level of length and burst and range. Like he's their unicorn kind of athlete like that on this roster. But like it was never fair to him, and we tried to say it kindly, I think. Like he was never going to be polished as a perimeter defender in the middle of a season when he's never done that before. But the fact that he was able to do it capably, not fantastically, but capably, was huge. Because now, if you're Quinn Snyder, you've seen him do that without really having him being trained on that much at all. And now it's like, okay, in the back pocket, yeah, we could have Jalen Johnson be even for not the number one perimeter defender or whatever you want to say, like he's an option on guys. And the Hawks need that. And also, he did the other things. Like he did the steals. I'm glad you mentioned the steals and block, because he does create havoc with his hands. He reads the game very well for a young player. He still makes rookie mistakes like guys do. That's fine. But steals, blocks is not everything, but it helps. And rebounds. I mean, he's a very good rebounder. And that's not a small thing on a team, especially everyone seems to be, not everyone, ready to move on from Clint. And I get all that. If they don't have Clint, you need all the rebounding you can get from everybody. I mean, you already do, but Clint's been the gobble up everybody rebounder for years now. And Jalen being literally on paper their second best rebounder this season by the numbers is also big for a guy who and maybe a reminder that you don't want him to always be on the perimeter. It's one of those, like, it's tantalizing because he can do so many things well that you don't want to bring it full circle, put him in a box. I think using him as, he's not a, unicorn gets overused, but as a guy who can do so many different things that most guys cannot do all of these things, but harnessing that and having him take a step forward. And also he's healthy. That's another thing that I want to make sure I mention before I forget. Last summer, he wasn't healthy. Like, people kind of forgot that because Bogey was the guy who was really out. But Bogey and Jalen had the same update on the same day in like May of last year. It was basically like, we'll see you in training camp. Jalen didn't have summer last year. He didn't play in summer league like a lot of guys would have. So now going into the summer healthy to like work on some stuff and have Quinn and the staff imprint some more on him. Like, it's tough to not be excited about like everything that he could do and stuff that he already can do right now.
Yeah, and there's like two sides to that really. One is you want to put him into a role and into a lineup construct that allows him to use his strengths the most.
Yeah.
Right. But on the flip side, the versatility that he has, and I should say the emerging versatility he has, because it's not all there yet.
Right.
Just it gives you so much flexibility around how to construct lineups, right? And that's the value of that, is that versatility. If you need him to guard a 2, if he continues getting better at screen navigation and ball containment and all that sort of stuff, that's there. If you need him to, I think he could play small ball 5. I think, if they develop lineups and develop a style, a scheme, base to build that, I think you can do that. And there's just not a lot of guys that can do all of that stuff. And that gives you so much flexibility from a roster standpoint. Like, I think about, he can play at forward with Hunter and compensate for Hunter's rebounding issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
He could play with Bay and just take the harder assignment so that Bay doesn't have to kind of get on that harder assignment. He wasn't ready for that in the Boston series. That's why we saw Bay on Tatum, so much. But you wonder if like a year from now, if it's going to be, if Jalen will be at a point where he's drawing that, as the second guy on the other team's kind of best guy or whatever that is. And it's not crazy to kind of think about. A year ago, to have this conversation would have been mind blowing,
right?
But he showed enough that it's it's there to be the second best rebounder. Clint's a top 5 rebounder in the league, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
Jalen had 9.7 per 36, and that's a great number, especially for forward. And so just his impact, and I to your point, he's so active and on his toes all the time that even if he is defending on the perimeter, I feel like he's a guy who's going to come back and help rebound the ball, even from the 3-point line, where a lot of guys just don't have that natural mobility, and his instinct for rebounds and just his proactiveness to be a helper there is just really helpful. And that's helpful if you're playing Trey and DeJounte together. I know DeJounte is statistically a good rebounder. I think that was a lot more the case of the one, where it stood out more. But that rebounding and his ability to grab and go, just to compare it to, like, you think about it works with Hunter, it works with Bay. Can it work with John? Because one of the areas John has to contribute is as a rebounder, but you don't want John grab and go. You want Jalen to grab and go. So there's a lot to kind of think about. Okay, where does he fit into, 3 or 4 different lineup constructs that feature him really, really well, allow him to keep contributing in a broader and broader way. And that's just really interesting to think about. He has more future versions of himself than any player on this team, I think, by a lot. And that's so fascinating to me.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs. And when you get there, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 with FanDuel. And it's bonus bets coming back to you if your first bet does not win. Download the FanDuel Sportsbook app right now. They have great promotions every single day. The app is safe and secure, and NBA lines and sport you can pick up with a variety of different angles to choose from. That includes future bets, in-game betting, player props, point spreads, totals, money lines, and more across sports. When you win on FanDuel, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet all the NBA playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get that no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. One more time, that is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. We can kind of use this as a pivot point to the offense too, but there's kind of a fine line, and I don't mean this negatively, And when I say that he's not a plug and play player, it's not an insult to him at all. It's that there's a fine line between like he's not a guy that is proven to be someone that you build around. You know what I mean? And like that can be tricky, and it can also be great because we just talked about how many skills he has and the size and all that stuff. But you kind of have to think about more than you would on some supporting player, which is right now he's still a supporting player, like how it works because of the strengths and weaknesses. And on offense, it's the jump shot or lack thereof right now. On defense, it's kind of like, what do you want him to do? Because he can do so many things. But I think with the new staff, they can probably approach this in a way where they can plan for it a little bit. You can invest in him. And he showed enough because, a year ago, I would be the first to say that I like the draft pick a lot. But after he didn't play at all as a rookie, that's not his fault. You couldn't really plan around Jalen Johnson as like a building block. You were hoping, but you hadn't seen it at all. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to be an all-star because you don't. No matter how high you are, you don't know how good he's going to be. But he's at least shown enough to where you can reliably be like, okay, this is a rotation guy for us at minimum. Probably better than that. You're hoping for better than that, of course. But it's easier to kind of plan for that, which takes a little bit of the pressure off of him to kind of fit in that box and also to like maximize his skill set. And the grab and go is a good way, again, to transition to the offense because, I've always argued, even dating back to his college tape, like his transcendent skill at the moment is the transition stuff. Like the fact that he is as big as he is, and as long as he is, as fast as he is in a straight line, and as skilled with the ball as he is, to like, you don't want to. There's some blasphemous comparisons you can make that I won't make, but like he can go end to end in a way that few guys can do. To be honest, I'm not saying he's the only guy to do, but are there 20 guys in the league that are as terrifying as Jalen Johnson going from one end to the other with the ball in their hands? I would say probably not, just physically.
Yep.
And he's not polished like those guys are yet with it, but in fact, you see it though. It's not just the dunks either; it's the fact that he's a willing passer.
Yep.
Like he had a 2-to-1 assist turnover ratio this year, not a huge volume either way, but he stopped turning the ball over. He passed the ball well. He's got good vision, and he can handle the ball. He's not like a primary ball handler, but as a grab and go piece, it's very helpful. So I want to start there first because it really is the part of his offensive game that's the most proven and I think the easiest to weaponize right now.
Yeah, I think it is the passing, the general connective skills. I think that he has. I think the ball handling is a part of that connective skills. He could take the ball in space on offense when the defense is forced Trey and or DeJounte to get the ball up and kind of just be really competent, like with his decision making, see the floor, and those sorts of things. In transition, I noted. I think, like I said earlier, played about 1,100 minutes, 106 transition possessions, resulted in him shooting. That's a big number for a guy who's not a high usage player.
Yeah.
And the per possession was 1.21. Like elite guys are like 1.4. And so they
also want it, by the way. I don't but like Quinn has said, even on the record, they want him to grab and go. They're encouraging him to go, and which is not a small thing for a guy who was 20. Like, go ahead, Jalen. We want you to do it. Go.
Yeah, and that was an area where I think Trey had to let go of some control there because early in the season there were a few moments where he and Trey were frustrated with one another around that, and I think Jalen was wanting to grab and go and Trey was wanting to kind of do what he's always done. And as the season went on, you saw Trey just running up the floor, filling the wing, and Jalen doing that. Now, getting really late in the game when you're up by say 6 points, like Trey's going to want to like just own that
right.
position.
Yes.
But in terms of other kind of situations, that was there, and you can kind of see like when he sees the rim, like he'll get to say the top of the key or 1 or 2 steps from the top of the key and see a path to the rim. The last third of the season, you could see, oh, that guy can't beat me to the rim. And he would just put his head down and go. Now it's still a straight line, right? And if a defender kind of gets there, he doesn't have a lot of craft there other than just trying to kind of go over him or through him, which is great for him. Like going through defenders, sign me up all day long. Like he's a handful in that area. But I mean, the fact that at that age and with that amount of experience that he made, I don't know, 85 to 90% of decisions in the open floor around should I pass it, should I look for a teammate, or should I be aggressive and go to the rim? I think 85 to 90% of the time he got it right. There was a play in game 1 of Lakers Nuggets, and I don't know if people remember this, but it was like the one thing that jumped out at me. The Lakers were at the time kind of trailing by, 15 points or whatever it was. And Lonnie Walker created a steal, like right at the nail, and went up the floor with the ball. And they needed a three, like they needed to open threes in the worst ways. And Austin Reeves was wide open on the right side of the floor, filling the lane. Lonnie was kind of working from the middle towards the left, and he ended up passing the ball to, I think it was Rui, down towards the left corner with a guy closing out on him. And Reeves was on the right side of the floor, like just below the 3-point break, just jumping up and down and waving his hands. Yeah. And it's like, and I'm rooting for Lonnie. I like Lonnie and stuff like that. But that is a play Jalen sees immediately, makes that pass. And Lonnie's just not doesn't have that competency that Jalen has in that sense. Lonnie's been helping the Lakers a lot. But it's just like one of those things. It's like, when you're trying to figure out who Darvin Ham is going to continue playing, that's a play where it's like, I have no doubt when they went back and watched tape, they were like, stop, Lonnie, you got to see this pass. Like we have to have this
right there. Yeah.
I know, on that play, Anthony Davis ended up making a 3-point play the old-fashioned way, but it's like he has to make that play. And when I watched it, I immediately thought of Jalen. Jalen would make that play. I have zero doubt Jalen would see that pass. Jalen would see it as soon as he crossed half court. Jalen would further set up by kind of moving defenders, away from that side of the floor. And there's so much subtlety and so much instinct that's kind of built into that's fascinating to me. And I want to see, as his minutes presumably ramp up, is Trey going to sprint to corners when Jalen has the ball? Like Trey doesn't usually kind of, he hasn't historically done those things a lot or at a high volume, but you wonder if some of Trey's other habits are going to start to evolve a little bit when Jalen has the ball in the open court. Like, is he going to sprint the corners like Bogey does, or like AJ does, right? And will Trey kind of, the first step was like giving Jalen those reps and giving him those opportunities. For me, what I'm fascinating is next year, is Trey going to be like, oh, Jalen's got it, I'm going to do my thing, I'm going to sprint to a corner. It'll be really fascinating to see. But that's the stuff that like gets you out of your seat when he makes those plays in transition.
Yeah, definitely. And people. Again, I'm not trying to be negative about it. People take that like I see the words point forward thrown around with Jalen, and he's not there. He's not there yet. Maybe he could be in the future, but transition does not mean point forward. Like he can do that, but in the half court, that's probably, if you were sort of diagramming like his game right now, his half court offense is probably his biggest weakness at the moment. And it's not necessarily that he can't do anything. He's a good connector, like you said before. The rebounding, he's a good passer. But we made a lot of it in the series, but it was true. Boston in particular, he was not being guarded. And as 3-point shooter right now, he's not a threat. And teams are not going to guard him until he proves otherwise. And that's one thing. I'm not saying that's a huge fatal flaw, because it's not. It's just the reality at the moment. They all know it. I'm sure he knows it. The team will tell him that. And he's going to have to be more willing. And he was willing. I'll give him that. There were still times when he didn't take them, but he wasn't totally unwilling to shoot. And that's good. You want him, he's going to have to make that shot and take that shot enough. But like, I won't go through all the numbers, but the team for the season was worse with him on offense by the numbers on the floor. And that is not a surprise to me. And it's not an indictment of his talent. It's the spacing and the fit. He's a low usage player right now, like very low usage, which kind of comes back to like, what do you want him doing in the half court? He's not a huge free throw rate guy at this point, which I think could change. I think he could be a big free throw rate guy in the future. Yep. He's not getting in the line very often yet. And maybe that's that he's not a great free throw shooter at this point. Maybe he's a little bit less excited to get there. But that's an area that I've circled that's kind of a low-key, not talked about thing, but like he's only averaging like 3 attempts per 36 minutes. That's got to go up for his style of play, his physicality. Just go right to the rim, get fouled, draw that. But, I mean, what's it up to you about his half-court offense? Because, like I said, for me, that's his biggest question. It doesn't mean it's something he can't answer. But like the fit questions, if you want to find fit questions, it's really that's the spot. Like, what do you want him to do? What can he do? What's the role around him? All that stuff.
Yeah. So the point forward stuff, the first thing I think of is I doubt he's ever run one pick and roll in the NBA. Right?
I mean, yeah, probably not. At least not on purpose.
Yeah. If it happened, it was probably weak side, 8 seconds on the shot clock, or whatever. And so, and that's a big question for the coaching staff is. They run that what they call stack, pick and roll for DeAndre, and DeAndre is not dynamic in that at all, right? No. He has a massive size disadvantage at times and can kind of really get into space and get some matchups, and he does some good work in that area. But it's not as kind of the defense kind of bends towards, or bends around that screen, that pass that's there. DeAndre doesn't see that hit that really with any kind of consistency at all.
Mhm.
And so a huge question for me is that going to be baked into his plan for this season? Like, are they going to give him those opportunities to slot pick and roll that they run for Hunter? Or is that something that they feel like he's not ready for? When I talk about that and think about that, I wonder, like, is he going to play 2 games in Vegas Summer League and run pick and roll and run the offense, and those sorts of things? When he was a central point of the offense in College Park his rookie season, but that was more of sort of the Jokic kind of model where he was starting initially the offense as a big, right?
I was going to ask you that because like one of the comparisons that I've seen, and it's kind of a lazy one, but it also works, is like let's just assume for a second that he never becomes a very good shooter. Like some of the ways that the Warriors use Draymond, and they know that he can't shoot, not can't, but doesn't want to. And like obviously Draymond's a one of a kind like Hall of Famer, so this is an unfair comparison. But like there are ways to use a guy with the ball skills that Jalen has if he like in that kind of hybrid role where he's not operating from the post, but it's the high post, or he could be kind of a perimeter creator without running a lot of pick and roll because Draymond doesn't really want pick and roll. It's just he becomes, and again, it's the Warriors, it's a difficult system. You got Steph, but like I've seen that thrown out there, so I just wanted to throw it out there too.
Yeah, and a lot of that is kind of back to the basket or shoulder to the bat, like not facing up the whole defense, right? That's a different thing.
Yep.
And it feels to me like I feel like he can run the offense kind of in a face set position, depending upon how he handles. Like, can he handle one basic action over and over and over? Like the Hawks never run any like dead center pick and rolls for Hunter. It's always stack into that slot right to the 3-point break, and he goes from there. And that's about all Hunter can handle. The really, really good wings can run middle, side, stack, slash, and then get into other stuff as well, where you're running Spain or whatever. And he's so intuitive that I feel like if he can if they can find a way to safely get him those repetitions, I think it's interesting to think about what that could be. But, the other part of that is on a team with Trey and DeJounte and AJ, who we want more opportunity for him. Hunter, if he's still on the team, kind of what is that going to look like? So how do you ramp up his half-court usage, and how much short-term risk are you taking on to give him those opportunities? And do you believe in the ROI in the longer term if you move him into that? That's maybe the most fascinating thing to think about in terms of what Quinn and his staff, the staff he'll put together, are thinking about is what does his role look like from a secondary, high-level secondary, or even moving in times into kind of being a primary on the presumably against other team second units. But how is Quinn going to be like, we're just going to do what we do with Hunter, the stack pick and roll, and that's all we're going to add this year? Or no, we think he can do 2 or 3 different kinds of actions, and we're going to throw more at him and trust him to deal with that. I think 3 years from now, I think he could kind of do all of it, right? If he's developed in the right way. This next year, that doesn't feel like that's the answer, but I know Quinn will lean into some things where there's potential sometimes, where other coaches, maybe the coach that preceded him might not, and that's fascinating to think about.
It is. And, when you and I talked about AJ, we kind of, I think, ended up agreeing on AJ has a more projectable all-star future, but Jalen might have higher upside than AJ because of just the tools and the fact that we're talking around it. And I'm not saying this is likely to happen, but if he put everything together in 3 years, he's definitely that kind of ceiling player. Yep. And this is a rabbit hole that we will not fully go down, but I have thought about what it might have looked like if Jalen had been drafted to a team that was not trying to win and gave him a ton of reps. Picture your tanking team, and at number 20 in the draft, that wouldn't have happened. But if Jalen had gotten drafted 6th overall, which he could have very reasonably, honestly, he's that kind of talent, and gone to a tanking team, and just did a bunch of stuff, I don't know if it would have worked, but we would probably know more now about what he can and can't do in some ways.
Right.
But instead, he went to a team where they were trying to win. He had guys in front of him. His rookie season wasn't. I'll be very clear. It was not a wash. People say that about Jalen's rookie year. He played professional basketball in the College Park and learned a lot. And those reps do matter. We don't watch them, a lot. Even me, I will raise my hand. I didn't watch a ton. I watched more because he was there, to be honest, than I would have if he had. But because they were kind of outside of mind, people like just act like they didn't happen. And it's like, no, that does matter. It's not the same as playing in the NBA. I get that, but playing in the G League and having real professional coaching and getting reps, that does help you. There's no doubt about it, and we shouldn't forget that. But it's like, where do you kind of land on? Because, and we'll wrap up. But like, I just wanted to always say, like, I've thought about it, what it might have been somewhere else. But this also might be the better path for him. It might be better for him as a guy or as a personality or as a player to be like kind of have to be eased in and like, be put in a position where, hey, Jalen, tonight we have to use you, but we don't want you to lose us this game, which I'm sure was kind of the messaging from Nate at times. Right. And I'm not saying that's great, but like some young guys, it might be useful to be like, you have to play this role because we were asking you to do this one or two things. Yeah. Like that could be helpful too.
Yeah, and for me, I don't think I would change. Like if I could go back and change the path he was on. I know fans are frustrated that he didn't play more, but I think the initial messaging for him was, if you're going to play, you got to be able to do it on defense.
Oh, definitely.
And so many times,
definitely the message.
Right?
Yes.
Definitely the message, right? And you see so many other young players who get dropped onto a bad team, high usage offense, and that realization that I have to do it on defense to like really earn this role on my team never registers. Like I would think about, like, I don't know, it's just a guy like Jalen Green, right, in Houston, right? It's like, what is the thing that's causing it to register with him, how much he needs to commit to his defense, right? That's hard for young guys who are in super high usage roles on bad teams. And so from that standpoint, and Jalen has come a long way on defense, and that's where they need him to really, really show up, like with all of his talent on that end of the court. And whether it was the most strategic kind of plan for Jalen, or if it was just an old coach saying it's old coach stuff, it still turned out to be the right kind of message for him.
I 100% agree, because, and it's not a slight about his offense, but I firmly believe that it is to foresee Jalen being kind of that game-wrecking, all-defense level player than it is to have him be an all-star in offense. Now, he can do both, but the path for him, given his tools, is maybe not so much, but I think for me it's easier on defense. Not in terms of like actually playing is easier, but like just the way that what we saw this year. But let's just use this year as an example. This is sort of a recap podcast. He's way further ahead on defense. And part of that's just because of the tools, and it's easier for him to do that. But like, if you're going from just where we are right now, he's a lot closer to being that like real game record defensively. And that maybe doesn't happen, to your point, if he's somewhere else. So maybe on offense, he'd be more developed in certain ways. But on defense, having that sort of, however you want to put that, like skill set, who may never to fit in the world, it is so for him to be like, hey guys, I'm so good on defense, you have to play me. And not because you need my defense. With Trey, especially, and the way they built this team, his defense is going to be very, very, very important moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny for me, I think about kind of a guy who's, say, 7 or 8 years in the league, right? And I think about Aaron Gordon, right? Remember when Aaron Gordon was, I think there was an assumption that he was going to be this big wing that could do all this stuff on offense and average 20.
He wanted to be that guy. Remember, like he wanted to
absolutely wanted to be the guy, but it wasn't until he kind of let go of that ambition and threw himself. And now he's one of the best. I don't know what 10 defenders, and he's awesome on defense, right? Yeah. But he uses his size. He plays at the 5 here in the postseason, playing at the 5. He rebounds, he pushes the ball in transition, he plays hard, he shows up with athleticism. Now, I think Jalen has a much more robust set of kind of potential skills on offense than Aaron Gordon had end of year 2 or whatever. But I still think that is kind of the thing that he needs to be able to bank on every single game is defensive impact. And then we'll see, like, can he earn a lot of on-ball like responsibility on offense? We're probably not going to know that for like 2 more seasons, right? To see how, I think you're going to see some effort and some opportunity and see how that goes. But that he should be able to like rely on that defensive impact every single game, regardless of whether he ends up having a bigger offensive role or more of an Aaron Gordon kind of role now, and that sort of thing. And Aaron Gordon makes a huge difference for his team. Massive. He changed the trajectory of the Nuggets kind of last couple of years and kind of going into this year and stuff like that. So it's interesting. The last maybe thing for me is I watch him shoot. The shot's kind of flat. His mechanics are a lot more simplified this year than they were last year, for sure. Yeah. So they've simplified all of that. I just wonder, like, what you see or what you hear, if you're hearing anything kind of like, no, we think he can kind of get there, or, just kind of what your sense is around his shooting. I think it's 50-50, could go either way. I think it's kind of a lazy answer, but that's about what it is for me.
That's kind of the consensus. I don't think that he's going to become a great shooter. I think it wouldn't. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think he'll always be a guy that teams are probably going to help off of. And you hope that, honestly, Aaron Gordon isn't the worst comparison. I mean, I like Aaron Gordon. I hadn't really thought about Aaron Gordon as a comparison. It's not perfect, but it's a pretty good one for what Jalen kind of is in a lot of ways. But Aaron Gordon's a guy where he's a better shooter than Jalen right now, but at the highest level, he doesn't get guarded like that. Like he's not a guy that you just totally ignore, but teams will be wanting to. I mean, in a playoff environment, it's like, Aaron, if you want to take 10 threes, go ahead, man. We have to give you the shot. Jalen, he shot 29% this year. I think that he could be a guy that shoots in the mid-30s, and that's fine. It's more of, will he take them? And number two, what is the counter in terms of, like, you have to have some alternatives. Like, he's not going to be a pure floor spacer. So, like, the Draymond thing earlier, obviously Draymond's a one-of-a-kind thing, but, like, you have to, as a team, as an organization, and also Jalen himself, like, what are your counters if he's not being guarded? Does he be more on-ball reps as a pick-and-roll guy, et cetera? But as far as three-point shooting is concerned, I think they believe that he'll make enough. He'll improve. He works at it. We've already seen, to your point, that he's gotten a lot better, and he will shoot them. He's not afraid, which I think that's a big, big thing, especially for a guy. Like, he's a confident guy. I think that my projection, if I had to give one, would be, like, I don't know if he'll be this year, but I think eventually he'll be a 35% three-point shooter.
Yep.
That can't be totally ignored, but also, like, in the crucible, like, he's going to probably have to not be afraid to shoot them, but he's not going to terrify you either. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And even in the Boston series, he went from, like, game 1 and 2 to being like, I'm not taking the shot. As the series went on,
they were like, hey, man, you got to shoot
shot.
that. Well, you have to.
That may not seem like a big deal. That is a huge deal. It is an
Absolutely.
That's step one in his process of developing as a shooter. Is I'm going to take this shot. You give me the shot, I'm taking it. And he came all the way out of his shell in game 1 and 2. And he's like, "Can I drive to the rim? Can I do something else besides take this shot?"
I think it really is. I think it really is organizational too, which is why I mentioned that. Like, I think that I don't know this for sure, but I'm very, very confident that in a film session or 3, Quinn was like, "Hey, Jalen, if you don't shoot that, I can't play you."
Yep.
Basically, I mean, again, that's a playoff series against a great team, so it's obviously it's selective. But in that series, he had to shoot that shot, and he wasn't going to make 40% of them. It is what it is. But, like, the risk is becoming Matisse Thybulle, and Jalen's a lot better than that in a lot of different ways. But, like, we've seen Matisse Thybulle, who's this really good defensive player, just be, like, unplayable because he won't be guarded, like, at all, and he won't shoot. Jalen has other skills, so it won't be like that. But I am very sure Quinn was like, "Hey, Jalen, don't care. I don't care if you make it. You have to shoot. You have to shoot the shots," and he did, which is good. I mean, to your point, like, he's a confident guy. Jalen is not lacking confidence.
Yeah.
Like, he's a former top prospect. I think if anything, he probably wants to do more than he's doing now, which is good. That's what you want.
Yeah, but to your point, it's an organization. Like, he needs the whole organization telling him, "We believe in you taking that shot. Like, we want you to take that shot. We need you to take that shot." And he's 4 for 11 in the playoffs. Tiny sample, but, like, when he, like, made that open 3, I think in game 5 at the top of the key, and just immediately went into shooting, like, motion, and I was like, "Hallelujah! There we go." And Quinn was probably 10 times that on the inside. So.
Strong agree. All right, we've done enough on Jalen for now. And by the way, it's another guy we talk about for an hour if we want to, but it is what it is. We almost did. Glenn, you'll be back again for more in the near future. But in the meantime, where can folks find all of your work?
ATL and 29. Kevin and I did a preview of the conference finals, and we laughed about the fact that I was 1 for 4 in the semifinals. This has been a hard one.
I am similarly bad, by the way, and I'm doing it for Sportsline, which is I guess probably more high risk than what you're doing on Twitter. So I'm also
no one listens to me for betting purposes. At least I hope that that's the case.
Yeah, me either, I guess.
So we'll kind of keep it going. Draft stuff soon. Peachtree Hoops still supporting a lot of work guys are doing there, and then Twitter at Willis_Glen. You can see it there if you're on YouTube, but find me. I enjoy conversations there. So yeah, that's where I'm able to be engaged.
Follow Glenn. As for everyone else, please subscribe to this podcast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. And we'll see you all next time.